Okay, so we are so honored to have you guys here. We appreciate you coming here all the way from Silicon Valley and talking to us to Startup Grind. It's not your first time you're speaking to Startup Grind, but it's the first time in London. So do you mind telling us, 2-3 sentences about yourself? Can we start with you, Julia?
Sure. Actually, it's quite special because it's the first time that the three of us have been together on stage for over 2 years. So the first time ever at Startup Grind. So we're huge fans of Startup Grind. Thank you so much for having us tonight. And I'm Julia. I'm one of the co-founders and president of Eventbrite. Eventbrite's mission is to bring the world together through live experiences, much like we're having tonight. So before starting Eventbrite with these two fine gentlemen, I was a television executive at MTV, where I worked on the first season and the first movie of a show called Jackass, and pandering. And the second the second job I had was at FX Networks, working on The Shield, Nip Tuck, and Rescue Me. And those were the only things I did before I started Eventbrite. So I have a very short resume.
Well, thank you. Thank you much to Startup Grind. Our last Startup Grind was in Melbourne, Australia. So I feel like we're taking the Startup Grind World Tour. We'll be at Dublin next week.
Very nice.
My name is Kevin Hartz. I am one of the 3 co-founders and CEO of Eventbrite. Prior to Eventbrite, I started a company called Zoom. And Zoom is a company in the money remittance business. We help people send money back to their families, and we were going after a big, lumbering, horrible incumbent named Western Union, which charged immigrants a lot of very high fees, high exchange rates, and we came in to innovate in the market. It was a transactional business. I left that in the end of 2005, stayed on the board, and started Eventbrite with these two.
I'm Renaud. I'm the tech guy on the team. I started my career as a civil engineer, actually, so nothing to do with software. I liked to program at the time, but I didn't want to make it my career. And then the web took off, and I fell in love with the immediacy of the web. You could write a few lines of code, push them out, and everybody had access to them. So in 2000, I switched careers. I started working for one of the first photo sharing sites, a bit like Flickr 5 years later, but we were very early, raised a lot of money, spent a lot of money. My company went from 30 people to 120 to 10 in 1 year, so it was a roller coaster. Very informative and on what not to do and how not to run a company. So I learned a lot there, and then
But we knew you'd be the right founder because you were one of the 10 left.
Exactly. That's what you have to get when you go through that, be the last one standing. And then we met in 2005, and it's been another roller coaster, but much more successful this time.
Just up.
Okay, so I know about you that Julia, you are an ex-ballerina.
Oh goodness! Well, I grew up dancing, so I think that how I speak about that is I never imagined myself an entrepreneur because I'm really, really good at taking direction and making adjustments. So I was well suited for the corporate world and found myself moving fairly quickly up the ladder in Hollywood, and could never imagine that I would ever want to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't that kid with the lemonade stand. So.
And Kevin, your hobby is investing, right? So you were one of the early founders, or early investors in PayPal, even in the company before that, which the company pivoted into PayPal.
I was very fortunate to be involved or to be an investor and advise in the very earliest stage of PayPal. It was a wonderful experience from a learning perspective. To have a front seat at watching a remarkable operating team, very bright entrepreneurs do some magical things during the hardest of times. I got involved in the company because I knew a few of the team members from Stanford undergraduate days, from student government actually. And they were absolutely brilliant back then and knew they were going places, and that was the reason to kind of latch on, you could say I was a PayPal groupie is what I refer to myself as, rather than a part of the PayPal mafia.
Okay.
But it was very informative, very helpful to watch from that front row seat and learn from the remarkable things this team did.
Mm-hmm. Just to mention for the audience, maybe there are so many companies which came out of PayPal, but the biggest ones like YouTube, Yelp, LinkedIn, these are all the companies founded by the PayPal people when they went and spread out. It's pretty amazing. And you also invested at the seed stage in Pinterest, and there was one other company, Airbnb, right? So it's pretty amazing. How do you just select those people, those companies? Because having this track record sounds pretty incredible.
Well, I think that startup investing success is just remembering the ones you were successful at, and forgetting about the horrendous messes you've been involved in, and convincing everyone else that you've never been involved in horrendous messes. I jest, but not entirely. I am just a student of startups. I love how 2 or 3 entrepreneurs can have a massive global impact in a short amount of time, and love to learn. And my investing background was, or focus was really driven out of learning more. So it was a costly hobby, but it was in some regards that you invest in these companies and you hope for the best, but it was really a learning lesson. It was a means to see how different entrepreneurs, to see Ben and Paul and Evan at Pinterest, or Brian, Nate, and Joe at Airbnb, or Peter and Max and the crew at PayPal. It's really studying those entrepreneurs and interacting with them and seeing how they operate and how they make decisions. It was extremely informative in my case for Zoom and then Eventbrite. I
can imagine. We know that you guys met on a wedding, right? And what I'd like to know is, how did you meet Renaud? What is the story?
At a wedding. No, just kidding.
We didn't meet at our own wedding. It wasn't, Julia wasn't a mail order bride. Or I wasn't a mail order bride. We met at someone else's wedding.
No, just keep going. You want to tell the story about how we met Renaud?
Please. Well, actually, it was a colleague of mine from Zoom, Brent. Was one of those other 10 remaining at Zing, joined us at Zoom, and Brent is just a remarkable engineer and very talented, still working away at Zoom. Zoom had an IPO last year, but I always trust the people that Brent had worked with and vouched for, and so we had this trusted introduction, and we had a period where Renaud got to know Julia and I. He started helping out informally, and then we all said, let's take this thing on, let's do it together.
So you were not looking for somebody at this particular time, but you met, and then you kind of get to know each other, and then afterwards you decided.
Well, I think it was always clear to us that we couldn't do it without an engineer, right? We couldn't create what we wanted to create. Both Kevin and I aren't of the engineering ilk, and so while Kevin had a background in product, it was really Renaud's engineering chops that made it happen. And so the way we divided and conquered in the beginning, which seems so quaint now but worked quite well, was I would find the customers, so I focused on marketing and customer support, and I would listen to them and then take their ideas, give it to Kevin, and Kevin would design the product, and then Renaud would be involved in that process and build the site. And that's what we did for the first 2 years. I mean, it's 8 years, it's like sort of like an overnight success, 8 years in the making. For the first 2 years, it was just us. And we bootstrapped the company, so it was all our own money. And I think we got pretty far. I don't know, I feel like, there was a scrappiness and a resourcefulness that we all had, and I think that was one of the main things that bonded us. Now, Renaud actually was working remotely, so not only were we deciding to found a company together as a soon-to-be married couple, which is like, a big no-no in America. We were also going to co-found a company with somebody who wasn't going to be in San Francisco. And so I feel like now I can say this in hindsight, but of course, we were working against all odds. And so it almost made us want to succeed even more. But we had this nice 24/7 dev schedule because the overlap was very minimal. And so Renaud would code while we were sleeping and we would QA while he was sleeping. So it actually worked to our advantage.
And you work over distance, so you kind of worked together and then shaped the idea, and Renaud was building it remotely?
It was
more
living in
Paris.
We weren't just handing specs to Renaud. It was a collaborative effort between the three of us.
But it would have just been an idea without Renaud.
And we all got all our customers' email for the first 2 years, so we would see exactly what was wrong with the product. We could react.
First-hand experience. Yeah. So what was the biggest pain point you wanted to solve? How did the idea came about to build something like this?
You want to take it?
Well, we realized at the time that the state of the art for promoting an event was putting a flyer on the wall, sending a bunch of emails, keeping track of things in Excel. And there were all these websites that catered to different services, and we were not seeing any tools out there to help organizers like yourself do your job. And we added on top of Kevin's experience with PayPal, we thought of a scheme that would actually give the ticket sales directly to the organizer via PayPal. So that was really what launched us, this easy integration, easy access to money as well, which is a big pain point for organizers who need the cash to organize their events. So that was the basic idea that we had, create something very simple based on all the things that Kevin had learned at these previous companies, how to make the product very seamless, very easy to use, easy to get started on. All you needed was your email address, basically, and in 5 minutes you could be selling tickets. Which was unheard of from any other provider out there. There were solutions for the bigger events, the stadiums, the theaters, very cumbersome, coming from the pre-web era or the web 1.0 era, and we thought we could do a lot better than that and make it available to everyone.
So you went after the long tail of the small events, there's many of them, let's do something for them. Did the original idea change over time?
What's most gratifying to me as a first-time entrepreneur is that we're actually doing what we set out to do, just much bigger than at least I could ever imagine. So it really was always about the long tail of events, which means everything that is sort of outside of the realm of traditional ticketing in terms of the big, O2 Arena, Beyonce shows. It's everything else. It's what we're doing tonight. It's a cooking class. It's a yoga workshop. It's a food festival. It's a tour, it's any type of class or a seminar. And for us, we were always interested in enabling anybody to be able to sell tickets to great live experiences. And I think that it very much looks like what we imagined it would be. I don't know, maybe you guys are bigger dreamers than I am, but I didn't know that it would actually become a full-fledged global marketplace where people would we dreamt of a day where people would come back to maybe find things to do, or we could become a destination site. But that's actually happening now. It's a true reality, which is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a few ways. We talk at Eventbrite about the heart and the mind of Eventbrite, and the heart being this notion of live experiences and this old medium that's been around for thousands of years of people gathering together. We're social beings, and we come together for entertainment, to learn, to challenge ourselves in sport, and all these different segments. And that is this something that technology we thought would take away from us, that we would become very isolated. In fact, technology is kind of bringing it back. Is this a moment where, somewhat as the printing press just proliferated the use of books, and that continued on from there, could we do the same thing with all these different live experiences? And then from the perspective of how we talk about it from the mind or the more pragmatic sense, we talk about being a multi-category e-commerce marketplace. If you think of Amazon as a place that sells books or electronics or housewares, Eventbrite has live experiences, sells tickets or to conferences, to races, to music festivals, to classes and seminars and politics and fundraisers. And so we're building out all these different categories. When we began, we saw what is now been embodied, followed a strategy we didn't kind of know at the time. It's been embodied in a book called Blue Ocean Strategy that is a really enjoyable read. And that's the notion that when you enter a market, don't go after the red ocean, the highly competitive, kind of bloody environment. And for us, that would have been going after traditional ticketing, that it would have been just a fruitless task, a dangerous task to do. And instead, we went after the underserved enabling market, those that couldn't or didn't have access or couldn't afford these expensive, cumbersome ticketing solutions. And that's where our base and our core market has really grown.
Yeah, what's pretty amazing is Eventbrite is not just a money-making machine, it's very successful. What happens is you're helping people realize their dreams, and I'm sure you have many people who send you thank you emails for helping them make a living and having a passion to work for. Do you know any examples of people? I'm sure there are some crazy events happening on your site, from mud runs to events like ours. By the way, we would not be here today. We only started these events in London 9 months ago. It's just so easy with Eventbrite. We just set it up and click a button. It
we
works.
Paid him to say that.
Thank you for this.
That's our speaker fee.
Right there. So what are some interesting ideas how people use Eventbrite?
Well, I think that what's interesting about Eventbrite is there is this true sort of DIY or entrepreneurial spirit that happens on Eventbrite. And in 2008 and 2009, when things were looking very bad in the US and everything was very bleak and a lot of people were losing their jobs, we thought, oh God, what's going to happen to Eventbrite? Because people won't have disposable income to spend on events, and we weren't nearly as global as we are now. And really, I guess it affected the whole world. But what was interesting was that actually our growth was really strong during that time because people were actually using the platform as a revenue generator, and they were going out on their own. We had a woman, one of my favorite stories is Bibi, who's in San Francisco. She was a corporate executive at Williams-Sonoma, the lifestyle brand, and she sort of quit her job at the same time that things were going south and went to culinary school, kind of had this moment where she needed to break away. And when she graduated culinary school, she thought, well, now what? I mean, the market was awful to get a traditional job, and to make a decent living as a chef is really rough. So she she thought back about all the cooking classes she had ever been to in her life and how it was always really heavy-handed. The chef is always very serious, and you're not having that much fun until the end when you get to drink and eat. And so she thought, why not flip that and make it a party where you're drinking and eating the whole time and you're cooking, and you just happen to learn how to cook it at the same time. And so with that concept, she launched Parties That Cook. And to date, she's had over 60,000 guests who pay about $150 a pop on her site in about 7 different cities around the US. And she built it all on Eventbrite. And so that's the kind of story that gives me chills, and that makes me really excited about what we've built and why we're doing what we're doing. It's not only because she's been able to find success, but that the people that come to her classes have an amazing experience, and that's really kind of the lifeblood of Eventbrite.
That's pretty cool, yeah. So before we jump into what the journey was, can you just share some numbers which are safe to say? Like we know from the website that you have over 200 million tickets sold. What are some other KPIs which you are following?
Well, you mentioned earlier we sold $1 billion worth of tickets last year, and our growth rate, we've maintained our kind of average growth rate over the last 5 years, or our growth rate over the last 5 years has maintained steady. So we're just compounding in growth year after year. We've, in terms of specific numbers, I always have to point to London as our 3rd biggest city in the entire world. Since we're here in London. We are a very metro city-based business, so much like a Yelp or an Uber or so on, is that you have to build this out on a local scale. So San Francisco was finally replaced by New York as #1. And yeah, so New York, San Francisco, and London are our three biggest cities. We receive most of our the greatest amount of traffic is still coming from referrals from Facebook, which is pretty incredible. And that is not organizer referrals; those are attendees that are attending events and sharing. So that continues to be a big portion of how people discover things on Eventbrite. And not to rest on our laurels of the success of the social side, what's important in entrepreneurialism is always trying to stay ahead of the curve, is that you essentially have to disrupt your own business. And we're going through a period of disruption right now. We all are, with the mobile revolution. And so at this point we're seeing, we haven't revealed, I don't think we've revealed any specific stats on mobile adoption.
We're the worst people to ask because we'll tell you anything. So everybody's like,
Bethan, and our head of corp communications,
she's ready to
over
dive
here,
across
she'll tackle me if I release any numbers. But,
okay.
Suffice to say, mobile is a large area of growth, and it's an area that's right at this moment. Every engineer, product person, designer, and then anyone else that can spare a hand is working on what we call Project Ubiquity, transforming, ensuring that every part of Eventbrite is mobile and
we definitely haven't talked about that, so
there
you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what's also interesting is on the consumer side, millions of people a month buy tickets on Eventbrite, and over half of them are repeat buyers. So what's exciting for us is that our focus is entirely on this idea of a global marketplace where Eventbrite becomes someday the only place you have to go to, hallelujah, to find something to do, whether it be a date on a Thursday night or a family event on a Sunday morning or a conference that you want to attend. So, our ultimate goal is really to be ubiquitous with all live experiences. It's this grand vision, and we're taking it one step at a time. Okay. But I think the consumer behavior and the event goer behavior is actually the most interesting on Eventbrite right now.
There was a question on Slido here. So how many events have you served in the first 3 years? And what were you doing to convert attendees to users?
I vote Renaud to answer this one.
Well, like without the actual specific numbers, it takes a long time. It's kind of a long fuse business where, we initially started going out and talking to people live and getting them to sign up in front of us and watching them do that and talking to people on the phone. And so those first dozen customers that we worked with, we just worked with, almost on this personal level and really got to know them and understand their business. And as we look back at it, it was completely invaluable because oftentimes we do things or we push things out now that we just look at numbers and metrics, conversion rates, and so on. So it was a very long fuse, as I would describe those first 3 years, and it's pushing a big boulder up a hill, and that is the message to the audience today, is that that initial push. You hear about the Instagrams and the WhatsApps and so on. In the notion of, are people familiar with the technology S-curve? In short, an S-curve is how long it takes to go from 0 to 100% consumer saturation. And for example, the radio took decades, television, a little less, the internet, 20-ish years, and now mobile and so on. And something like WhatsApp, went from 0 to near 100% penetration in a matter of months, measured in months. And so those compressed S-curves are intimidating as an entrepreneur to see these companies grow so fast. But what we find in durable, long-lasting companies is not to say that these fast-growing companies are bad. I've been involved in quite a few of them. But there's something to be said about really nurturing and building a business and really understanding the customer and building something enduring that takes a long amount of time, especially something that has these local attributes to it that's cyclical like events. So I would say those first 3 years were very arduous.
Can we tell the story about how every year we would make our plan and you would say we weren't going to make it, and now you have to say that every year because we're superstitious?
We're still
every year we'd put together this plan, and it was like, you know, pie in the sky. We're gonna do. We started putting together almost like board decks every month from the very beginning when it was just the three of us, and we would present them to Kevin's dad, and we would put together these plans. So we have annual plans for every year that Eventbrite's been in existence, and we would come up with these insane numbers, and the whole routine was Renaud would say, and I can't do it because I can't do a French accent, but you would basically say,
We'll never make it.
yeah.
But you have to do it in more of a French accent.
This
is
like
impossible.
over the top.
Is that a French accent?
No, it's horrible.
Yeah. So we know that you've been working for 2 years together, but how long did it take, that's the question from Slido, from the initial idea to actually launching the company?
Renaud,
Now
do you remember that?
we have to jump a bit into the complexity of Mollyguard, which is a
We had a different name when we launched.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was an
Well,
interesting story.
the very earliest incarnation of Eventbrite was a simple application that was built during the days that Alan Braverman and I were working on Zoom. We built about 7 or 8 different payment apps, and we did it under this different moniker, Mollyguard, and called it Mollyguard Events. And we created this freemium, very simple event service and put it out there live and kind of forgot about it as we focused around Zoom, the money remittance business. And the actual really first incarnation of that was literally done in a few days. It was a simple web form connected to PayPal.
Do you guys remember when we relaunched as Eventbrite?
It was 2007, I think.
So it was about between the time that we met Renaud and the time that we relaunched as Eventbrite with a sort of completely revamped product that we'd been iterating over time, and then the new brand was less than 12 months. So it was pretty quick, and we never. I guess the thing I remember is that we never sat around and talked about it much. We just did it, and because of that sort of somewhat unique starting point, we had something to work with from the very beginning. It was a sort of like, freeware site that had been laying dormant for a couple of years, yet had users. And those users were our peers. They were people in the tech community who are the best first users, or the worst, I don't know, that you could ever imagine, because they're very vocal. So once we started to sort of poke and prod and instigate a conversation within that community, we had a lot to work with. And it seemed like a pretty compressed timeline between the time that we started working on the product and just making tweaks to when we rebranded and sort of relaunched. I guess we never really went anywhere, but rebranded and came out as Eventbrite.
So you kind of prepared the stage, you spoke to people you knew to get on the site first. What happened to the second wave of people you didn't know and who were coming on the stage? How do you start acquiring users? We are all entrepreneurs, we are founders, we are people who have startups. What can we learn from your journey to apply? So how did you make it?
Yeah, it's a great question. We looked for the tailwinds of the period, and the tailwinds of that period of the mid-2000s were SEO, and we're of course in Google's headquarters, and SEO is still very organic search discovery is still very important. Yes. But we were looking at peers, Jeremy Stoppelman and Yelp, from PayPal that had really ridden off the back of organic search discovery, and we saw that this was a wonderful way to attract consumers and the like to Eventbrite. What was happening is that people would come publish events. We started with this this very manual process of talking to friends, getting the ball moving, trying to reduce the friction of the flow, as Renaud spoke about. And once an organizer would publish this very interesting concept, a startup entrepreneurial event, a cooking class, a band playing in some small club, this really unique content got picked up by Google, and we started to see this lift, and pushing the big boulder uphill became a little easier. Yeah. And then the next wave, and again, being very opportunistic, and again, what we learned from PayPal, watching PayPal grow and draft off eBay. eBay had this very tight community, and PayPal at the time had no idea how they were going to distribute their product. They thought it was going to be used for people to pay bills, to split bills in restaurants, and they saw this organic adoption inside the eBay ecosystem, and it just took off from there. We saw that with the opportunity of SEO, and then we saw it with the opportunity of Facebook, that events are naturally social, and we saw organic traffic coming from Facebook, and looked at that and observed and started to better integrate with Facebook.
That's a very good point. So Facebook Connect, you're one of the first companies which have been plugged into Facebook Connect. How did you, which wave was it? Was it the third wave or the second wave after you started to get users? You say SEO, right? And then those other two waves?
SEO,
PayPal,
social, Facebook, and then Twitter came, and it's sometimes it's one mechanism, it's one vector, but we've leapfrogged. Today it's all around mobile, and it's all around we just think about demand generation is attracting consumers to all the great events that are being held on Eventbrite.
Yeah.
And these two forces are the forces of now. And in a sense, you want to reinvent yourself. I mean, I assume most of the startups here are fairly early on and are either just catching or looking to catch that first wave. But whether it's finding some vector of growth through an app store, or through WhatsApp itself, or there's many different mediums to grab on and propel your business forward. But distribution is typically what I've seen is the make or break component of a business. I've seen lots of great products, wonderful products, fail miserably because they never got to distribution.
Yeah.
And so we just methodically and focused and looked at what was coming and how could we use that to our advantage.
Yeah, so as Julia says, you started with doing the things which you wanted to do, and you're still doing it. And now you have these things which you got the customers, and then you had some baptism by fire, right? So how did you make sure that the systems are robust enough?
To add on to the previous point, we also had the luck of picking the right market that has an incredible distribution mechanism, all of you. If we give you a great experience buying tickets, then you'll probably think about us next time you organize an event. And from the start, I think that was a great way for us to gain organizers. A large part of our organizers were first attendees who converted into hosting their next event with us.
And also the free attendees.
Yeah, and the freemium model works great for us. I mean, a lot of people just play with the site on their free events and eventually convert into paid users once they start selling tickets for their events. I don't know if you started making new events paid from the get-go, or if you had a
we started free. We had 3 free events at the beginning, and then we jumped in on the startup grind bandwagon with paid events.
See, perfect example of
Renaud's point around this kind of internal virality is another important vector of growth. Of organizers attract attendees. Attendees want to go to these events. And we actually have a term, attendee to organizer conversion, and we look at that, and we actually, that is one of our KPIs. And then also that we have this free service that is free, and it came almost by accident. Organizers were asking for a free ticket type. If you had a speaker coming or a member of the press, you didn't want to charge them, and so you would have this as a $0 value ticket type. And organizers started publishing tickets with no fees, and it was growing incredibly fast. Today, 3/4 of our events are free events, and at the time we were like, oh my God, we're in trouble. We're giving our product away, and then we realized this dynamic nature of it, this compounding growth, this virtual cycle of tens of millions of attendees attending both free and paid events and converting at that same rate to being paid organizers. Today, our biggest source of new sellers, paid organizers, is actually attendees.
Well, we actually thought in the beginning it would just piss off our competitors to not charge a fee for free events, because everybody else was monetizing, trying to sell ads on free events or trying to bleed a stone. And we thought, why not? What have we got to lose? We really didn't mean to make it free, but it just happened and it took off, and it became, it's 2/3 of our business are free events. Even today, we ticketed over 1 million events last year on the platform, actively ticketed, not just published, and 2/3 of those were free. So it's a huge driver of our business, and something I'm glad that we didn't undercut and that we just let it ride.
It's very clever. If you wanted to know how much can your platform handle, how did you test it? Did you have any tests internally, or you just went for the biggest event you can get? And,
in the early days, we
asked our parents to user test the site.
We were tested by our users. Our biggest event, I think even to date, is still from 2009, I think, the Salsa convention in Mexico that had 120,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Totally organic. We had no idea it was happening until it happened.
We just saw the visits on the site going up and up and up the load. So we realized early on that our success would be based on our capacity to handle large events. I think that was a natural evolution for our service. So in the early days when we had a very small engineering team, we didn't do load testing. We just made sure we had enough extra capacity on the servers to handle these types of peaks. I don't think we planned for this type of events exactly, and we went down a couple times when we had these massive events like President Obama going to Georgetown and the Georgetown people organizing a lottery to decide who was going to have the chance to see him. You can understand that the whole town wanted to see him, so that was a big event for us, but also a big load on the server. Yeah. So we've lived by trial for the first few years, and now we're much more predictive in our anticipated load. We do a lot more testing, load testing. We know how many page views each of our servers can handle. We have a lot more caching than we had at the time. Mm-hmm. So we're handling large on sales almost every week these days, with large festivals, with the Tough Mudder events, all these events that sell within 10 or 15 minutes of being live.
What's exciting though is that we can't predict everything, right? There is, because we're self-service in nature, and many people come to the site and use us without ever calling us or letting us know or giving us a heads up. We see things all the time that are not only phenomenon in ticket sales, but also cultural phenomenons. We're starting to see these sort of the fandom type events, much like gaming conventions, happen around YouTube and Vine stars, and it's a bunch of like 12-year-old girls, I mean thousands of teenage girls coming to meet these guys, and the on sales are rabid. And when they first started happening, we were like, what is this? And you really start to see this because we span such a wide breadth of events and we're global. You start to really get this interesting slice of cultural phenomenons that are happening around live experiences that include what I just mentioned, as well as obstacle course races. So has anybody done Tough Mudder here? Is there a Tough Mudder in the room? I feel like somebody said yes.
There's
nice.
One. Come on, Will Dean's.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, founded by Will Dean, an ex-British Special Forces guy, who it's an obstacle race that's quite unlike anything you've ever heard of. Because of that and sort of the segment overall, we're seeing obstacle races become very popular, or themed runs like Color Run, Zombie Run, Bubble Run, anything you can imagine run. And that's exciting for us because it not only gives us this lens to look at sort of global culture, but it also challenges us because we never know when something's going to go on sale in a very fast manner. We always have to be ready, and we've built a dynamic system that's really smart. So we can expand and contract with the needs based on any type of traffic that we have 24/7. But it's a good technical challenge. It's almost like a planned denial of service attack.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Ourselves.
So,
but I want to add just that it is one of these iceberg barriers to entry or challenges that when you look at companies, you say, well, what's the difficulty in doing this? And when a startup starts out, there aren't very many barriers, and you build those over time. In building the inventory service and the ability to quickly service hundreds of thousands of people coming to the site at one time that you get from these different phenomena is a very defensible service. Stopping fraudsters that are continually trying to create fraudulent events and run stolen credit cards through and take the money out the other side is a competitive advantage. And that's what over time, you build, you discover, and you develop these. Our free service that generates all these new customers, our anti-fraud techniques, our mechanisms of handling high velocity inventory, all these become very sustainable competitive advantages.
Yeah. So in order to have these systems in place, you need funding, right? So, and you did something clever, which many startups don't even think about, and this is bootstrapping. So you bootstrapped until the point you didn't need the money, and then you got some, right? So can you tell us about your funding process, how it went? Because we know that you raised over 200 million, is it correct? So what happened at the beginning? How did you look at the needs of getting some funding from outside or from your own savings?
Well, my personal experience with Zoom is that we always raise money when we had to, and that becomes a very difficult process, and you're not always in the driver's seat in those points. And so in the spirit of Eventbrite, it was to be as self-sufficient as possible, and that's really the lesson. If there's one lesson to instill upon entrepreneurs, don't be capital dependent. Have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. Be able to bootstrap your company, be able to moonlight, stay in your job, and work on the business and off hours, but get something into orbit. We're in a period of time with open source software, with just the ability to reach a mass audience very, very easily, that you can launch products, unless you're Elon and producing an electric car or launching a rocket ship. You can go very far, and so I really would urge the entrepreneurs out here today to get as far as you can, to show results, and then when you're in that driver's seat, the investors come to you. And that was really the story of Eventbrite.
But a little known chapter of Eventbrite is when we actually went out to the VC community in 2008 and went and pitched Eventbrite to actually raise that money, and we didn't raise money. I think a lot of times
we
in
were
history,
turned down, actually.
Yeah, so we were turned down. So it's like revisionist history. We always talk about when we did raise money, but we never talk about when we actually tried to and we couldn't. And the interesting thing about that experience is, it helped to validate the business, to go out and defend it. But also what we did was we left our plan, our 2009 plan, with everybody we met with. So everybody had what the plan that we had all agreed we weren't going to make in their hands. And that could have been really not great for us when in fall of 2009, we went back out to that same community. But we'd actually done what we said we were going to do. And I remember thinking, because this is, was my first experience with this, wow, like that, why is that such a novel idea that everybody's so impressed that we did what we said we were going to do? And I think that it was a testament to us building a business that we could at least predict directionally where we would go and what we would do. And it showed that we were serious about this and that we were able to gain that traction. And that's when, at the end of 2009, we raised our first VC tranche of money, which was $6.5 million US from Sequoia Capital. And so it took us a while to get there. I mean, between the time that we decided we were going to raise money and when we actually did raise that first round.
Mm-hmm. So now we have the money, and now you have the systems in place, and you getting people on board. And we know that Eventbrite is one of the best employers in the San Francisco area. Why are you so highly regarded in terms of being such a great place to work? What's your secret?
Well, I think we've had the fortune of because we've grown this company over time, and because it was just the three of us for the first 2 years, we really got to build our own set of philosophies and really understand what was important to us. And so because we didn't have to hire, just like Kevin said, we didn't have to raise a bunch of money, and we also didn't have to hire a bunch of people. It's funny how that happens, because we didn't have any money to hire them with. But what happened was we understood what was most important to us, and that was really product and people. And so when it came time to hire for Eventbrite and grow our team, we kind of knew who we were, I think more than the average startup company, and we knew that people were always going to be sort of first and foremost to what we do. And at Eventbrite, we really orbit around this concept of basic human decency through hypergrowth, and we put the Brightlings, so Eventbrite employees, before the company and the company before ourselves. And I think that just came natural to us, but I think it's actually really set the trajectory to have this company that's rooted in humanity and that is really by the people and for the people, if that makes sense. And so for us to grow sustainable culture through this crazy roller coaster ride, the culture had to be grown by the Brightlings. And to be honest, I mean, the three of us don't have that much to do with what the culture is. We have our DNA is in the company. That's just something you should know, is that you will be in the company somehow. Your tendencies, your philosophies, the way you do things, they will live on even if you can't. It's like having children and you're like, whoa, how did you pick up that trait? And it will happen, but if you really put the power of building a sustainable culture in the hands of the people and have your culture be the manifestation of those people, really amazing things can happen. And that's truly been the ride from 3 to now 375 worldwide.
So what's the culture of Eventbrite? What are the key traits you are looking for when you're hiring people?
Well, we've, when we started the business, there were three things that we gravitated around, and one is transparency. We always came from positions, or we were in these positions where we were not given much information, didn't know what our real purpose was. And so we always wanted to be very transparent and open with our numbers to a fault, although we've been trying to restrain ourselves tonight. Mm-hmm. So, at Eventbrite, all employees see the various KPIs, our weekly gross ticket sales, our number of new sellers on the system, number of new attendees, app downloads. All this information is readily available to everyone. And that information is much more powerful when you have 375 very talented people looking at that rather than 3 or 4 so-called executives. So that transparency was very important to us. Collaboration is very important to us. I think we thrive when we're able to work and solve problems together and enjoy one another's company. And so much less being very individualistic or independent or almost having this competitive nature in the culture. We clung to this notion of collaboration. And the third is, I would say most important, is around learning and intellectual challenge. It's why I spent so much time in universities, and I loved going to school. I love and talked about what I was saying earlier about investing in startups is learning and seeing, whether it's various mentors. I see a question on there about mentors, but I learned from the different startups I invest in, the different mentors, the board members that we've found and brought into the fold over time. And going through each of these stages of Eventbrite and learning and expanding is incredibly rewarding, and so those 3 tenets are really what we cling to, and it's something very important to us.
We can imagine. In terms of the company growth worldwide, how important is it for you to have a local office, local spot? We know you opened recently an office in Melbourne, in Australia. Do you see yourself as totally online or mobile place where you don't need to be somewhere as opposed to being somewhere physically present? What's your view on this?
Well, I always wanted Eventbrite to be international, so there's a lot of things that we had to do to get there, and I'm so glad now that we have all these offices all around the world. I think it really depends on the markets. We can serve different markets from London, for example. That's what we're doing now. We have about 35 employees here who take care of all our European business. Yeah. Sales, marketing, customer service, all based here. For the moment, I think as each country grows, we'll assess whether we need the talent to be in the country. I think even business is a bit special, and especially in Europe. It's a lot of face-to-face meetings to convince big organizers, for example. They're maybe a bit more faithful with their providers than in the US, where they jump the bandwagon to the newest and fanciest competitor. They tend to do that much less, especially in Germany, for example. It has that culture of relationships that they build over time and that they trust over any other hype that can come their way.
So you plan to open some offices within Europe?
I think as our business grows, we'll see the need, and we'll have other offices at some point.
Okay.
Yeah,
and while we have you on,
we have Dublin, for example.
Yeah.
Dublin.
Sebastian was based there.
Yeah, working in Dublin for a very short period of time with tremendous results. I think for us, it's. I think we have seen the amount of gross ticket sales, which is sort of our volume. It's the amount of gross ticket sales that event organizers generate on the platform. For this year alone, we've surpassed the last 3 years in Ireland. Wow. So I don't think it's any coincidence that we've had boots on the ground in the form of 2 Brightlings in Ireland and seen these tremendous results. I think it's incredibly important to for us to have realized that our service is really global in demand, but local in nature. And in due time, we'll make our way around the world. It's not probably what we thought we'd be doing when we were always focused on scale, but it was appropriately timed, where now we do actually have the resources and the people to put in market, and it's a tremendous opportunity for us to see that growth.
Yeah, international, I mean, just as the basis of the internet, it's an international phenomenon, and it's to the detriment of Silicon Valley that it had been so US domestically focused, and that all these great companies were growing outside of the Valley or making an impact outside of the Valley. And we've really tried to take on a global view and really think broadly in that manner. And then I would also just add, there's a spectrum when you're thinking about your own startup. The spectrum is there are companies that scale insanely fast, that maybe don't have certain payment needs or customer service needs or high touch needs, again, like the Dropboxes, the WhatsApps, the Evernotes, and so on. These are companies that grew, of course, are brilliant and wonderful products, but grew with relatively less effort and local effort. And then there's extremely high touch. We're somewhere in between, but the touch we have is incredibly important. I just watched a video where in Ireland of a customer talking about how from Cork about how they'd been in touch with Sebastian and the team, and Sebastian had mentioned, this is an internet business. Yeah. You transact entirely online. You publish your event online, but having a local presence, having a live person to talk to, is incredibly important to us. And when we talk about more of these pillars of Eventbrite, customer service is just another one where we really want to be there to help and not be another one of these untouchable internet services. And that it's funny, it's been this long for us to mention it, but that is a key pillar of our business, is that personal touch. Yeah. It scales extremely well.
How do you stay focused? Because there are so many things you can do with events. Really too many. We're doing small events, and we can imagine how many things you would like to build for your customers. How do you stay so laser focused to make sure your core customers will be always happy?
Well, it's we look at it as our challenge. Eventbrite's challenge is a challenge of so much optionality in terms of should we go into Asia now? Should we expand into Eastern Europe? So there's this international vector of growth. Should we move up faster into larger and larger events, larger concert venues? Should we move into more categories of events? So we have this large but wonderful challenge of where to go, and what we do is we really ponder and think about kind of the cost and return of each one of these areas. Does it make more sense to move to launch into Tokyo, or should we launch this particular category? Yeah. And really run through the economics, the return on that, because we over time want to be everywhere, but making the right choice and the right steps is critically important. Going too fast too soon, that was one of the mistakes I made at Zoom. Went into too many countries too quickly and had to retrench and drop a lot of the countries. Can be extremely detrimental So that order of operation is critically important.
And you also, over time, as you understand where to find success and what success maybe starts to look like in its very earliest stages, I think you start to really hone the skill of planting seeds. And so everything for us is in these different stages of growth or of gaining traction, and it becomes exciting, but also a challenge to continue to get back to center, because there are things that we're making investments in for the future, and we're getting a little bit better about thinking about the future, whereas in the early stages you're thinking about tomorrow. I mean, you're thinking about something, a horizon that's right in front of you, and maybe you're dreaming about the future, but you're really blocking and tackling. And I think for us over time, we've gotten better, and we're eking out that horizon a little bit more and a little bit more. I'd say we catch ourselves in the 18-month horizon, where we really need to be thinking 24 to 36. But we're starting to plant seeds for that longer horizon, where it's these areas of growth and investment that we want to be making, that we have to seed now because we've learned enough. But it's all about that compounding of time and learning in hindsight from what you've achieved in the past. But then always coming back to center. And we are challenged by all the opportunities and the bright, shiny objects around us, for sure.
I totally agree with this. And the question is, talking about learning, were there any people which you were asked for help, who were mentoring you? Did you have any personal mentors growing up within Eventbrite?
Lots of mentors.
Yeah.
Lots of mentors.
Well, I had technical mentors. I didn't know everything at the time when we started. I still don't know everything. So,
do you still have the same mentors, or you change them over time?
I changed them over time. I think we went different paths, and I'm becoming a mentor to a lot of others as well, which is interesting reversal, but
that's the next question.
Exciting as well.
I think also what I've learned about mentorship is that it can come in the most unsuspecting ways. One of our greatest mentors and a board member, Sean Moriarty, is the ex-CEO of Ticketmaster. And so when he was introduced to us during that first round of fundraising, or the second round, the one that was successful in 2009, he was sent out from a VC firm to kind of vet us and give the thumbs up. And I remember thinking, like, why do we want to meet with the ex-CEO of Ticketmaster? You know, he is the enemy. But I wasn't that compelled to meet him, and I can't imagine where we'd be if we hadn't taken that meeting or if we hadn't gone to see him, because he turned out to be one of our greatest advisors, mentors, spent a couple of years actually physically coming into the office a couple days a week from LA, and helping us. And he's been instrumental for all these reasons that I couldn't have even imagined. He's charismatic. He's a brilliant operator. He understands our business through and through. He understands the vision. He's a technical guy. And so I think the lesson that I've learned along the way is always go and take that meeting. Always go and hear someone out. And sometimes you have a lot of data inputs, and it can be really frustrating because everybody has a different opinion. But it's your job to filter through and understand the trends, and then also to let serendipity happen, where you might just find a mentor that was the most unsuspecting person. And that is what Sean represents for me.
It's an awesome advice. Just by people coming here, you can meet people you would not imagine to meet. It's really important to come and take the step and be proactive.
Advisors, advisors, mentors are a thing we were talking about earlier today, is that they're, in a sense, they don't cost anything. You know, if you can't raise money, if you're not paying yourself a salary, one way that you can boost your company or move your company forward or move your idea forward is to find people you admire, go out and try to meet them for coffee, find people that have been through experiences or people that you admire, and just reach out to them. And that's in fact what we did over the years. And you don't bum rush them and say, okay, I want you to be my mentor. A relationship develops, and that is a great way to kind of create this quasi board of directors, is to have a good advisory group around you and good mentors. And it's got to be a mutual relationship. It's got to be, and you kind of know it when you see it, and a relation develops. And I think mentors accumulate. Like, some I'm not as in touch with, but when I do get back in touch with them, they've always got some kind of great advice or insights or so on.
And come back to you, do you mentor other people? And how do you select them?
I find that informal mentoring is a thing that is really helpful to me as I'm continuing to learn. We have so much left to learn. I think each of our goals is to never stop learning, and I think that providing mentorship and hearing the perspective of other entrepreneurs is actually as helpful, if not more sometimes, because you're able to understand from their perspective the challenges and learn something along the way. So a lot of times it's symbiotic. It's a dialogue. It doesn't have to be just broadcasting or a one-way road.
We have 373 people to mentor. In the early days, that's our employees. Yeah. In the early days, it was I really enjoyed spending time with entrepreneurs in the early stages, and again, that back and forth dialogue, and we haven't, unfortunately haven't had as much time for that, but what's been really rewarding is finding all these up and coming entrepreneurs, leaders inside of Eventbrite and helping them. It's the way that we view, my mindset is of a startup operator, and the way that we view Eventbrite is a collection of different startups. We have a team of, very bright data engineers that notice that we're having these fraud issues, and so a group developed around fighting fraud, and we have a team just dedicated to that, that's its own kind of anti-fraud startup. We have a team that built reserve seating, a product we just launched a few months ago that's a brilliant product, completely self-service, design your own seats, entirely web or tablet enabled, and that was a team of 8 or so engineers, and so the enjoyment I get from mentoring these days is helping each of these different teams, whether it's marketing, customer service, product engineering, design, in achieving their goals.
Okay, so before we jump into questions from the audience, let's talk about the future a little bit. What are the key trends you see in the future for Eventbrite?
Well, I think the biggest one is really this notion, or the two biggest things are really building this marketplace that is analogous to the great marketplaces of scale in our time. And so, when we think about in the US, I do most of my shopping on Amazon because I know that I can find most things on Amazon. I find that to be very inspiring in terms of Eventbrite being that place that you can go because you'll always find a really great, different, exciting new live experience that will broaden your horizons and help you live more. So that for us is a big challenge. To create a global marketplace at scale is very hard to do, and we get excited by that hard challenge. And I also think just thinking about as we consider that challenge and as we consider being everywhere that you need to be, how do we create platform ubiquity? So how it's not just mobile, but how whenever you're using any type of screen, you're able to have that experience that is just profound and phenomenal and easy and effortless. And so those are really the areas that I think we see very exciting. And then that operative word of global, which in itself is a monster challenge that we're starting to embark on.
So you're going to be this Amazon for events, where people can really go and find any events. I have to admit, looking at our own statistics on Eventbrite, we get much more discoveries. So people who discover us on your platform, and I see this growing. It's also thanks to optimizing it for SEO. It helps. What are the key areas apart from this and the recommended events, which is an awesome thing, where you see your service improving, where you focus and you want to tackle an area and help your service get better?
I don't think we have enough time to list all the things.
It really is all areas of consumer discovery. We're in the infancy of consumer discovery of Eventbrite today. Yeah. We've really been more seller focused, and where we're turning and really pushing our resources is this notion as consumers, as people, we want to find things. We have lives that are more than just going to music concerts. And that's a very important part of it, is going and seeing live music, but seeing theater, running in a race, taking a class and learning something, coming to Startup Grind. It really encompasses, the live experience encompasses our whole lives, much like in the United States we have 400 TV channels on cable that you can see any topic, any movie or sports or public broadcasting or education. And we really want to be that cable TV for the real life. We want people to find all these great things to do. And how we get there, we have lots of ideas and lots of experiments in place, and that's our very exciting and challenging work in progress.
All right. Let's take 2-3 questions from the audience. So we have one, Darren.
Hi, Darren.
Could you just speak up?
I just want to ask a quick question about your business model, and a boring finance question. But I know that the nature of Eventbrite is that you take payment for tickets and then you hold it in escrow until which point where the event organizer gets it routed to their own bank account. When you started to hit scale in terms of ticket sales, did you find that money that you were holding in escrow allowed you to dig more further into a cash flow positive sort of?
We don't touch that. We never touch that money. And in fact, our goal is to get that money to our organizers before the event ends. So there's a very high percentage now of organizers that are getting their money on a regular basis before the event even ends, which is very remarkable. It gives our organizers the ability to market their events, find better vendors, do more with that, so that notion of a float is really non-existent. It's also a very dangerous game where we've seen startups, competitive startups using that money to fund their own business, and then getting them not just themselves but their customers in trouble. So that is sacred money, and our goal is to get that into our organizers' hands as fast as possible. Today with PayPal, we offer essentially 2 forms. You can use our own payment system, or you can use PayPal. And of course, if you have a PayPal account, you receive that money instantly. And our goal is to get to exact parity, where as soon as a buyer, an attendee pays, that it goes right to the organizer, and we'll be there very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question over here.
Shouldn't we be using our?
We have been actually.
We have been jumping from the questions
I
from
love
Slido.
this. I've been looking up at these questions. They're wonderful.
You've been asking some of them.
I've been asking some of them.
Slido
Yes.
this is
We just keep
incredible.
switching. Yeah.
Right.
And we're gonna go to the slide to Dan, and then we finish.
Go Slido.
Hi, Richard Lucas at delegatebag.com. I'm here with my wife, Lindsay, and she's the best business partner I've ever had.
She's rolling her eyes behind you.
Of course. But how do you manage work-life balance?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think that, well, one of the interesting things, and kudos to you, I mean, it feels like a dying breed, co-founding couples. No, we see more and more people actually starting companies together, and we highly recommend it. Our mentors in that realm are Michael and Sochi Birch, who founded, among many other things, Bebo. And they told us over a pint in a pub, quite literally, to divide and conquer. And I don't think they knew that they were giving us the golden piece of advice that we needed way back when in 2005. But that's actually something we've held on to and used as our #1 sort of rule of engagement with each other, because not only does it help us get from point A to point B 2 times faster because we're actually focused on totally different areas of the business, but it also avoids that collision. And it's something that I think all co-founders should be following, to be honest. I think that it's something that's useful to anybody, no matter what type of relationship you have. And then we also just happen to like to be together. And we started Eventbrite when we were engaged. So to be fair, we have no idea what life looks like when we're not working together, which is probably the scarier reality.
The point of the foil is really, really an important one, is that you have these complementary balances. Renaud is a foil
Not to be left
from
out.
an engineering standpoint. Yes, we don't want to leave
Very
out of the
brave
relationship.
co-founder.
And there's these personality balances. The top question there is how do you build rapport with the remote CTO? And it's exactly it's the 3 of our personalities. It's the chemistry that just happens, and in most cases, and it's no offense against married couples where they can't work together. My parents could never work together. They would strangle each other within the first 5 minutes of operation.
How did you build a rapport with us from a remote location?
You probably didn't have to be around me all the time, and that's why it worked out so well.
That's why we all like each other.
No, I think we talked a lot, and we're just working together, we were in separate countries, so we could divide our time effectively. I think we had some overlap at night for me and the beginning of the day for you. We could get things done, talk about the business, and move on and implement and
I like
grow this way.
I memorized the books that used to sit behind you when we would Skype in your little apartment, the library. Yeah, we used Skype a lot in the early days. Now we use Google Hangout.
Okay, we have one more.
We really do use Google Hangout.
We do a lot.
And we use
weren't
Chromebox, which is brilliant. It's a $900 video conferencing unit that we have in all our conference rooms and all our remote offices. And so this is a free plug to Google from my perspectives.
Okay. Now we have one for Julia. Julia, what advice would you give to entrepreneurial women wanting to make an impact in the tech, but are just starting up?
I think it's not much. I mean, it's hard because I think that there are obviously challenges as seen by the gender inequality in tech, or maybe even just reports like Google just put out, which I commend them very much so for opening that piece of their data on diversity. But I think it's about, for any entrepreneur, it's about finding great models. So role model feels so heady and like so much pressure, but I think that you can't be it unless you can see it. And so finding those models of people who have gone before you that maybe look a little bit like you, have the same background or something that you can identify with is really important. And I think that it's important to also be bold, and then whatever you think that is, as a woman, be 10 times bolder. Because I think the one thing that I regret is that I wasn't as courageous as I could have been in the course of building this company. There were times when I questioned myself, when I didn't have the confidence. And I think that is a real thing. And I think that you have to basically calibrate on being audacious, but being open to input. And so I don't think it has to be a very different course. I just think that we have to push ourselves to be assertive and to be confident and to have confidence in yourself and find those really strong models.
Yeah. The last one, an IPO. There's been a rumor flying around, Eventbrite is ready or is looking into these kind of things.
That question kept going below the fold, and I was like, vote it down, vote it down. And then all of a sudden, he made a comeback.
But it's Kevin's favorite.
There's no mystery there.
If you're not comfortable,
an IPO is a fundraising event, and we had an opportunistic chance where our current investors came to us with a very generous offer, and we took that cash. We now have close to 120 million or so in the bank. Okay. And our burn rate is, we're not profitable, but our burn rate is fairly de minimis, and so we'll keep investing and growing the business. And so an IPO is not right on the near-term horizon, but it is the next step for the business. Okay.
Our last question is, what would you do if you would not do Eventbrite? If you would have to start again tomorrow, I'm sure you guys have been talking about different ideas altogether. Is there anything in particular you were thinking about doing if you were not doing?
That's the most depressing, sad question you could ask.
It really is. I can't imagine life without
It's like taking away our children or something. How could you ask
I'd be working for Buford Taylor and ex-Breitling in the back row there.
Yeah, shout out to Buford.
Right now.
One of our first engineers at Eventbrite, out here, now an expat in London working on startup.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine a life, honestly. I can't even go there. I mean, my dream career was to be a backup dancer for Janet Jackson, but that never happened.
I thought that was Renaud's.
Second.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Eventbrite, Renaud, Julia, and Kevin.